also author of a book called Iraq. By satellite link from Washington, Richard Weitz joins us. He's a senior fellow and director at the Center for Political Military Analysis at the Hudson Institute. And we also have to my left James Andre, France 24 international correspondent. You're just back from Iraq. You were giving us earlier your views and impressions on the impact that this political crisis has on the population. I want to go back to Miriam Benrad. Miriam, you were saying something very interesting just before the break. You were essentially saying that the political crisis, if I understood you correctly, is at least partly, or rather I should say the political system that was put in place by the Americans is partly to blame for the current political crisis.
Yes, absolutely. As I was saying, the US set up a government that was based on a repartition of political functions along sectarian and ethnic belongings in 2003. And
was there another system? Was there a better system?
I think that it was at least the founding mistake of this whole period of occupation, because this system has prevented the existing political forces from engaging in a real national debate. And this national debate has been what the Iraqis have been asking for years now. The second thing I would like to say is that what we are witnessing today is also beyond the sectarian connotation of this crisis, is a return of Iraq to a certain, in a certain way, to an authoritarian practice of power that very deeply questions the transition, the legacy of the occupation in Iraq. As you said, Maliki is accused of being a sort of new Saddam Hussein, and he has, in the recent years, showed many times that indeed his government was resorting to authoritarian practices and also to armed force against, not only against...
Miriam, let me interrupt you for just a second there, and let's listen to the Iraqi vice president, who's at the center of this political crisis, Tariq al-Hashemi, who is one of the people accusing Nouri al-Maliki of authoritarianism.
The political aspect of this issue is to get rid of all those who oppose Maliki. That's clear. So Iraq can remain under this one-man rule and one-party rule. Unfortunately, Mr. Maliki does not accept other opinions. Therefore, it's hard for him to reach a political consensus and play a role in building a state of law, consolidating institutions and democracy.
So essentially, Tariq al-Hashemi, who's been accused, there's an arrest warrant out against him that was issued by Maliki's government. Mr. al-Hashemi saying that the accusations against him, that he was helping run a hit squad, attacking government officials, all that's not true. What is true is that Mr. Maliki just wants to get rid, in essence, of political opponents. Let's listen to what the Prime Minister himself, Nouri al-Maliki, had to say about this.
This is a criminal case. Lives have been lost. So myself and the relatives of the victims will not allow this case to be politicized or bargained away. There is only one way that this will be solved, and that way is justice. He should face justice. Either he will refute the case, or he will be convicted.
So Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki brushing aside accusations that the arrest warrant against the vice president has been politicized in any way. Fouad, you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I was about to say that, I mean, Iraq traditionally has been ruled by a strong person. I mean, by a king in the monarchy era, then by dictators and by strong military men, essentially. And the fact that ever since the ongo of the 2003 invasion of Iraq, there was no clear agenda on what the U.S. wanted to do in terms of politics in Iraq in the Saddam era. The only clear ideal was the promotion of democracy, but with no real plan on dealing with the local situation on the ground. And another thing, after watching the clip that you showed here, is the fact that it's kind of dubious to see that Nouri al-Maliki, which is a Shiite, indicting his vice president, which is a Sunni, and at the same time leaving aside other potential people that were involved in attacks against different parties in Iraq, and trying to point the finger in a poorly timed manner towards a Sunni, which is a part of the minority in Iraq.
So in your view, this is political. This is about a Shiite prime minister trying to get rid of a Sunni rival.
Well, it looks like, I mean, to most people in the region, I think that's how it looks, and that's how they interpret this action. If the desire of Nouri al-Maliki would be to apply justice, then I think he should have done it in a more broad manner, whereby more indictions should have taken place, and not only targeting the Sunni minority. And this kind of, tries to set ablaze the situation instead of trying to calm it down.
Richard Vates in Washington, what do you make of accusations against Nouri al-Maliki that he is sliding towards authoritarianism?
I think those are a good justification to be fearful that those accusations are correct. So we've, it's interesting because when he was here, he was being praised for promoting reconciliation and inclusiveness, and look what we're having now. But it's not that we were forewarned that this could happen. There have been complaints about his power grabbing for a long time. And that's why the Americans and the other blocs tried to set up a coalition government which would detach some of the ministries from the prime ministership and so on. But
in the end, it seems like this coalition government has just been a mosaic of parties defending the interests of their community.
Right, there's nothing wrong with that. If you have different groups defending their representations from their ethnic group, their religious group, but also their business interests, their gender interests, their political orientation in terms of liberalism, conservatism. Ideally, you get a broad mixture of people. But we've got very much a personalized system, which the parties are not parties of principle. They're parties of people, or they're parties of power. And so we don't have these strong institutions that you need to make a democracy function effectively.
And it's precisely because Iraq does not have these strong institutions that we've been asking the question, is Iraq at risk of breaking up? Now, interestingly, most provinces, if not all provinces, both Sunni and Shiite, and of course Kurdish, have asked for their autonomy. James, you were in Iraq recently. We're going to watch your report in just a few moments. First of all, you went to Kurdistan. Your impressions were that it's almost a separate country.
It is almost a separate country. Kurdistan is very, very different to Iraq. Kurdistan has not been hit by...
From the rest of Iraq, you mean?
Yeah, from
because,
the rest
of course,
of Iraq.
it is officially still part of Iraq.
Sorry about that. But yeah, no, it's very different from the rest of Iraq. It was not that hit that much by any fighting or anything. It's been independent now for a very long time. In fact, just after 2003, the beginning of the war. And you can tell that business has been running. It's rather calm. It's
James,
quite
we're watching a map as you speak of the Sunnis, the Shiites, and the Kurds are in the north of the country.
Yeah, exactly. They're up north, just above Kirkuk. Kirkuk is a very important place because that is where a lot of the oil is, in fact. So that is still very much disputed. But north of Kirkuk, things are basically Kurd, and it's quite surprising because it feels like going into another country. The rules are quite strict, actually. The other Iraqis are not really allowed to go into Kurdistan if they don't know somebody there that actually bids for them and says, it's okay, he's with me, he's coming to my place.
If you're from Baghdad, regardless of whether you're a Sunni or Shiite, but your family's from Baghdad or somewhere else in Iraq, you cannot go to Kurdistan unless you're invited.
You will need authorization. Yeah, you won't clear the checkpoints to get into Kurdistan.
And Kurdistan now has its own parliament, its own flag.
It's got its own flag. It's got its own army. They've got 80,000 men. That's what they've been allowed by the constitution. They have indeed their own president, Masoud Barzani. So it's really, as I say, it's not technically a different country, but it feels like a different country. But what's well, so that's been independent for a long time. But what's really changing right now is the Sunni Triangle, which are the three provinces which are just underneath Kurdistan, in fact, which are Al-Anbar, Salah el-Din, and Diyala.
So tell us about the report that we're going to see. You went to Diyala. Why did you go there?
Well, we went to Diyala, we went to Salah el-Din, we went to Al-Anbar, because we've been there, we were there for 16 days, so we really traveled around a large part of the country, if you like. And we went to there because Salah el-Din has asked to become autonomous after a vote on the 27th of October. And then now, as we were there, in fact, while we were there, Diyala decided to vote its own autonomy, and Al-Anbar will be following soon or has. So it's all these three provinces are really thinking very seriously about breaking off, and you can tell why. Well, you'll see in the report. I mean, we've spoken to the governors of these provinces, and you'll see what they have to say.
Let's watch this report by James Andre and Shadi Shlele.
Diyala province is one of the most dangerous in Iraq. It was an al-Qaeda stronghold. To move here, a heavily armed escort is required. It is also the third province in Iraq to vote its autonomy. In this fortress-like palace, the governor justifies the decision. He considers the Shiite central government neglects Diyala province and its Sunni majority.
On the ground, it prevents governors from performing their duties because of conflicts with the ministries in Baghdad. Sometimes there are security patrols that come from outside the province and don't inform us. It causes security problems.
The neighboring province of Salah el-Din voted its autonomy back in October. Again, the majority of the population is Sunni. Tuz-Kormato is on the border with Iraqi Kurdistan. For the head of the district, autonomy for provinces where Sunnis are a majority is inevitable.
With regards to appointments, we're marginalized, and there's pressure on the Iraqi provinces from Baghdad. They deliberately make decisions that are determined to certain regions. Problems in Iraq will never end if the provinces don't become autonomous.
At the market, people are concerned with this new division of the country.
We don't want the division of Iraq. We want to move freely to the north, south, everywhere. We're one people.
This province policy is no good. There will be more political parties and the rights of the poor will be violated.
Autonomy of the Sunni provinces in Iraq is strengthening the political crisis between the Shia majority led by Nouri al-Maliki and the Sunni opposition that has suspended its participation in government on Saturday. The real risk being to see the country divided in a war between Shiites and Sunnis.
All right, well, this begs the question, a question I'm going to put to Myriam Ben-Rad in Marseille. Myriam, is this the future of the country, autonomous provinces?
Well, I think the development that took place in the Salah ad-Din province and then in Al-Anbar and Diyala is interesting because it's true that historically and during the whole occupation, Sunnis were against federalism. They rejected the federal principle during the drafting of the constitution in 2005, and they regularly accused the central government of and the Kurds of promoting federalism against the unity of Iraq. So this is a very interesting and unexpected development. But I think it just points out to the fact that the real opposition today in Iraq, and I'm going back to this question of sectarianism, I think the real opposition today is an opposition between separatist temptations on the one hand and remaining calls for a national rebuilding on the other hand. Because this move of the Sunni provinces has been also quite badly received by some other Sunni forces, by some Shiites also, who are nationalists. So I think this is really...
Well, and Shiite Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, for one, opposes these demands and these unilateral declarations of autonomy. James?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I was just... it's true. The thing is, it depends who you talk to. when you go to Sadr City, as I was saying, you can tell that people are very pleased that the Americans have left, and you have this feeling that they are now, the bosses of the country, the Shiites. When you talk to them, that is kind of this feeling you have. Some people will say, look, we're not very happy because security-wise speaking, it might be a bit dangerous now that the Americans have left. But it's a very, very different story when you go to the Sunni provinces. And it's true that if a lot of people are there saying, we're afraid that the country might get cut up, and that is what we saw in the story, you can say that on the political level, there really is this dichotomy. I mean, that is what I've seen over there between the Sunni and the Shia, nevertheless. I mean, this is one of the main differences, I'd say, between, the different political parties. And
those who want a united country and those versus those who want to separate from the rest of the country, from central government in Baghdad.
Yeah, well, the Shiites would be the ones who want to stay together. That's what's happening at the moment also. I mean, it's true that some Sunnis would like the country to stay together, some Shiites would eventually are interested in federalism. But the fact of the matter is, you do get the sense that right now, the Sunnis want to break away and the Shiites want the country to stay one and a whole place because they're in power right now. That is kind of what...
Richard White's in Washington. As I listen to James, as I listen to Miriam, as I listen to Fouad, I wonder, is there a politician, is there someone in Iraq right now who can be help bridge the gaps, who can be a healing figure? Is there any politician who is not perceived as backing solely the interests of his community?
No, offhand I can't think of one. It doesn't necessarily doom this to failure, since it might be in their collective interest to reach a deal anyway. But you don't really have, I can't think of somebody, spiritual authority,
isn't that a little bit worrying, Richard, that there's right now, what that means, what that implies, is that all the politicians are seen as rooting for their side as opposed to rooting for the national cause.
Yes, but isn't that true for France and the United States as well? I mean, it's hard to me to think of a politician who's thought to be holding the national interest as opposed to the interests of his party or her person or whatever. Again, that doesn't necessarily doom a democracy. In fact, the founders of the United States thought that personal ambition would play a major role. The idea was to get ambition to check ambition. I mean, it's odd. I can't really think of it. It's odd that you would have a politician who would try and be a statesperson, a statesman or stateswoman, and do that. You sometimes get it, but then the problem is when they leave office, you've got a problem. You've got to make, if you do get that kind of person, you still have to have an institutional structure to function when he or she leaves office.
All right, Richard, Fouad wanted to comment on what you're saying.
My understanding is that until now there is a lot of different groups that are armed and that are allowed to be armed. You clearly mentioned Kurdistan has a clear army of 80,000 people. As long as you're going to have armed groups that are capable of waging war against one another, and as long as there is no centralized authority that is agreed upon
who holds the force,
exactly, that can, as I said earlier, glue everything together, then I think one of two scenarios can happen. Either there's a clear concerted effort by the centralized Iraqi government to disarm the militias and to instate them all within a centralized Iraqi army, which would be, I think, preferable for all the countries in the region, to have a moderately strong Iraq, one at least capable of putting itself together and ensuring that it can control its own borders at least. The danger would be obviously to have an Iraq then that would have a renewed ambition for glory and that would want to expand in different parts of the Middle East. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Iran would be the clear outcome. And on the other hand, I mean, if that does not happen, then clearly what will happen is that these parties will be tempted to fight against one another to grab power. And I think the question that we did not really discuss here is the question of oil. Who is going to be able to control the oil money? And especially since it's spread out, I think, in the north and the south. And so you have different provinces that are going to be more interested than others to be federal, to control as much money as they can from the oil resources.
Well, Fouad Al-Obaid there with the final word in the France 24 debate. Thank you all for watching us. Of course, we will be continuing to follow this political crisis in Iraq. Thanks to our viewers. Bye-bye.